in the
No
Teams app.
worries.
Okay. I can see you as well. Yeah. So, Dr. Anthony, so thank you for accepting my invitation.
Of
So,
course.
what time is it there?
It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, okay. So, hope you're having a great day.
Yes, it has been.
Okay. So, to start with, so I'm focusing on having different conversations with the global leads,
Okay.
covering the leadership, management, AI, some technology topics, as well
Okay.
as the motivations, laws, and all.
Hmm.
So I'm happy to have you today as a motivational speaker. And also, I have seen your speeches and the recordings and the posts you are posting on LinkedIn as an inspiring leader. Uh, so I have seen as an author as well, a comedian. Those things I checked your LinkedIn profile, and an entrepreneur. So,
Yeah.
like to start off with,
Mhm.
can you introduce yourself and a bit of your
Sure.
background?
Sure. So I like to say that I'm American by birth, Norwegian by choice. I immigrated to Norway about 14 years ago to continue my career. And I started my career as a computer programmer. So that was my first job out of university, and I moved from computer programming to singing opera to moving into academia, working as a researcher, a scientist, and a professor. And then most recently as an entrepreneur, a motivational speaker, storyteller, and comedian.
Okay, I can see you're wearing different hats. Yeah. So, could you share more about your personal journey into becoming a motivational speaker and advocate for this inclusive leadership?
Sure, sure. So my kind of journey there really started with my work as a professor. So I got very used to going in front of hundreds of students at a time and watching them one by one open their laptops and take out their phones as I was giving them a lecture, and realizing that I have all this knowledge that I want to be able to give to my students, but they don't want to hear any of it. And so I thought to myself, I have to find a new way of teaching. I have to find a new way of creating impact. And it just happened that I was studying storytelling and comedy kind of on the side as a hobby. And it all came together a couple of years ago when I found that through a program that I attended, that motivational speaking can be a career. I didn't even know it was a career. And I thought motivational speakers are just these people that go out on stage and jump up and down, and it's very superficial and nothing is very substantive. And I'm a scientist, like substance is my work. And so once I came to terms with the fact that both motivational speaking can be impact driven and it can be substantive as well as easy to understand, fun to engage with, and exciting, that's when my career took a dramatic turn into the motivational speaking world that I am in now. You
Okay.
had a question there about inclusive leadership, but I think I missed that one.
Yeah. So, like related to the inclusive leadership, now we are into this as an advocate for inclusive leadership. So, what made you to become that? I wanted to ask. And you told
Sure.
you're a scientist. Can I know a bit about that as well, that background as well?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So my career as an equality advocate, as a person who cares about inclusion, really began in high school. I went to a high school in a very rural area. It was very conservative, and I saw around me a lot of inequalities, and I saw around me a lot of people who weren't being given a fair chance at life. And I observed these things happening, and it wasn't really something I could take specific action on until I started going to college and I took a sociology class, and sitting in class learning about issues around race and gender. And looking around at my other students and realizing that they, as women or as gender minorities or as people of racial minority, ethnic minority, they didn't have the same opportunities that I had growing up. And realizing that was like a turning point in my life. And so from then on, I was really slowly but surely moving more and more into this field of inclusion. And that's when I started studying to be a professor. I started studying my doctorate. And when I first started studying my doctorate, I was very skeptical of the field. It was this issue of inclusive design. And I thought inclusive design, this is just kind of a Norwegian problem. It's a global North problem. It doesn't really affect the kind of communities that I felt really invested in. Communities of color, communities who are disenfranchised and disadvantaged. And it was in a field outside of the current area of research that I was focusing on, which was health and issues around health disparities. And so I'm sitting and looking at this job opportunity in Norway, and I'm thinking to myself, is this really for me? Is this something I can really dedicate the next 3 years of my life studying? And I spoke with my partner. I brought it up to her and I said, hey, this opportunity came up. I'm not sure what to do about it. Can you give me your insights? And she said, Anthony, this position is perfect for you. And still, after moving halfway across the world to Norway, I was skeptical. And so the first year of my PhD, I started learning that this issue of inclusive design also has to do with aging and how we grow older. And it also has to do with issues around health and well-being and equality. And still, I was skeptical until one day one of my students came into my office and said, Anthony, I've read some of your research and I found some flaws in what you've done. And I said, well, that's not possible. You're just a student. I'm a professor. I'm a researcher. I've got all these credentials. And she said, no, Anthony, what you missed was the fact that inclusive design can also apply to issues around gender and race and issues around global South, global North divides, and these other ideas that I had not yet considered. And so sitting with her and listening to her feedback and coming to the realization that she had found a flaw in my work made me want to fix it. And it made me want to fix it with her. So her and I collaborated for many years. We still work together in some capacities. And we were the first ones to collect data on this issue around inclusive design as it applies to groups of people that aren't just people with disabilities and older people, but people with who belong to racial minorities, people who are racialized, gender minorities, and things like that. And we were also the first ones to then take that research and start applying it into countries in the global South, first in Mozambique, and later on in areas like Uganda and China, Somalia, and other places around the world.
Have you think of coming to Sri Lanka as well, reaching the...
I would love to come to Sri Lanka. Stop it right now. I would come to Sri Lanka tomorrow. If there was an opportunity for me to do work there, I would be on the first plane. Absolutely. I have a passion for this work.
Okay.
What's that? Yeah, and so as long as the opportunity is there, and so for you and for all the people who might be listening to this, but I absolutely love bringing these concepts, these ideas, this work to places that haven't experienced it. And this was my experience working in Uganda for the first time. They invited me to speak at a conference there. And so they flew me down to Uganda and they put me up in a nice hotel, and I go into the conference and there's about 200 people in the room. And I'm the only person from Europe. Everybody else there is from Uganda. And I'm listening to the speakers speak, and they're really provocative. They're really driven by this experience of what it is to be a Black person in Uganda and how that helps them understand the world around them and to create new innovations. And I'm getting so wrapped up, and everybody in the audience is getting so wrapped up that it's moving us emotionally. And then I'm sitting there thinking to myself, now it's my turn to get up and speak. And how am I going to take this emotional experience and channel it into my research, which for me at the time was a real struggle. So I was so scared getting up there. And I gave my speech, and afterwards I was leaving the auditorium, and an older gentleman grabs me by the shoulder and he says, Anthony, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that you came here to bring your insights to Uganda. He said, because here in Uganda, it's not often that we get perspectives from outside of Uganda. It's usually just Ugandans talking to other Ugandans, and we don't often get a chance to hear from the world outside of Uganda. And it really touched me, and it connected to me, and it made me realize that one of my missions, one of the purposes of my life is to help connect communities around the world. And that doesn't mean I have all the answers, but it does mean that bringing these ideas into new environments gives us both a chance to have a conversation and to think more critically about the work that we're doing.
Yeah, thank you actually. So people usually get inspired by the personal stories, and yeah, your one is also that kind of inclusive one. So thank you for sharing that, as well as I wish you to come to Sri Lanka soon as well. I'll also see the opportunities where I can connect.
I would love that.
Yeah. So can you tell about we'll talk about this leadership is something crucial in the today's world. If we think in everywhere, with every person, every team, where whatever the company we are working for, whatever the domains, whatever the jobs we are doing, this leadership plays a prominent role and a crucial role. So can you expand on what inclusive leadership means to you and why it's important?
Yeah. Let me start from the why it's important. So all of my doctoral research focused in on this middle aspect of where things go wrong. So if we can think of an organization in kind of 3 tiers, right? You have the lowest level tier, and this is what we call the bottom up. And a lot of times these are folks who really care about this issue of inclusion and who are dedicating their work in their lives. But often they are constrained or constricted. They're not given the opportunities to actually make change. So you have this bottom tier folks who are just passionate about it, but aren't able to make those changes. Then you have the people at the highest level, the executive level, right? Often these folks maybe have a head for inclusion. Maybe they have some kind of connection to it, and they care about it enough to talk about it. They cared about enough to come out in the annual meeting of the board of directors and say, hey, we care about inclusion, or to create a narrative for the media that says, hey, we care about inclusion. But there's this middle bit, and this middle bit is where often things can happen or not. And so what I have been trying to work with over the years is finding ways of taking that middle bit and empowering change, creating change towards a more inclusive environment. And it's not an easy task. This is like you could win a Nobel Prize if you could fix this. And that doesn't even matter if it's inclusion or sustainability or anything. But if you can fix this, it's a Nobel Prize in it for you. But what I've been trying to do is just find ways of very softly, very gently inspiring, motivating, supporting change in that middle bit. And that's the whole crux of my speeches. That's all the work that I do is meant to make that little bit, that bit in the middle, move forward just a little bit.
Yeah. So as I know, with my experience, I know these people are struggling with the concept. So this inclusive leadership, can you explain or share some examples on how this inclusive leadership can be beneficial to an organization?
100%. So, just to put a really quick note on it, okay, inclusive leadership is all about working with people from backgrounds that are different than yours and creating value from that diversity. And I'll give you a story to back this up. So if you can imagine me in my professor office with all my fancy books behind me and my big leather chair, and I'm sitting there typing on my computer one day and I see, boom, a notification pop up in the bottom of my screen. And it's an email invitation to a UN high-level expert hackathon in Geneva. And it was personalized to me. They said, Anthony, we want you at this event. And my mind is blown. So I race up to my boss's office. I beg her for the funding to go to Geneva. And she tells me she's going to send not just me, but she's going to send me with a whole team. Now I'm excited because I'm going to get to bring all of my buddies, all of my fellow professors to Geneva to compete at this hackathon. And before I could even book the flights, she says, Anthony, I'm going to send you with 3 students. And so that crushed me. I thought to myself, I said, I am not going to be able to compete at an expert level hackathon at the UN with a group of students. This is ludicrous. I'm going to be humiliated. We go to Geneva. We compete. I am trying my best to hide my face every time anybody looks at me so they won't recognize me. They won't think, oh, this is Anthony coming to Geneva with a group of students. And the other teams are working on these brilliant innovations. And we all get up at the end to pitch. And my students are out in front pitching their solution to a group, a jury from the World Health Organization, from the UN, from all these expert level institutions. And I'm kind of listening to them, watching them, and I'm watching the jury at the same time. I'm standing at the back of the stage. And my students they revealed themselves in that moment. They revealed themselves not just to be a group of students, but to be some of the greatest minds that I've ever gotten the privilege to work with. And they talked about their solution in such a compelling way that one of the jury members started to tear up. She started to cry openly. And that touched me and it moved me and it made me realize something in that moment, that these aren't just students, these are superheroes, because they were able to win top prize. And it changed all of our careers for that. And I've reflected on it so much since then, because I thought maybe it was just we happened to have 3 genius students, and that's the reason why we won. We just happened to have these 3 excellent students. But then I went back to Geneva 2 years later, competed at another competition, and won first prize again with a different group of students. And so now I'm sitting here thinking to myself, Anthony, there's something unique here. And when I started looking at the 3 students that I had brought, the 3 different students in both instances, I realized that they had brought very, very different backgrounds and experiences. They came from different parts of the world, different mindsets, different programs at the university. And when I realized that, I realized the value that diversity can play in coming up with new solutions. And then I had to ask myself, well, what's in it for me? Well, what was in it for me was I got first place in 2 UN hackathons. I got to change the course of my career because everybody at my university knows that now I am a brilliant innovator because I was able to come with these 2 teams and win. And that, I think, is the value that's often overlooked in these discussions, is that we want to say things like, oh, diversity is so good, inclusion is so good, it makes our hearts warm and it makes us all happy and feel, we can all join arms and sing together. But it's more than that. It's about our businesses and it's about our ability to innovate. And mark my words, we're going to see some of the big brands that we're all used to seeing who have not yet embraced embraced inclusion, who will not be around in 10, maybe 20, 30 years. They will go out of business because new folks are going to come into the market. And they're going to see the value of inclusion, and they'll see that breeds innovation, and then they're going to outcompete all the people who have been around for years and years and years and years.
Yeah, thank you very much. So then let's move on to the challenges and the solutions. So I can see, since you are doing leadership sessions everywhere and in globally, like different countries and all, what kind of common challenges you have encountered and how they can be overcome, and what kind of solutions you can propose to overcome challenges?
Mm-hmm. I actually just made a social media post today that'll be published next week. But okay. It looks at the spectrum. It looks at 9 different archetypes of people, of leaders, from the folks who are highly motivated and who actively care about this issue of inclusion, to the folks who couldn't care less, who are actively working against inclusion. And there's about 7 archetypes between those two, between that spectrum. And I think what a lot of folks are missing are things that you hit on right off the bat. What's the value in it for them? Yeah. The second thing that a lot of folks are missing is how does inclusion connect to other issues that I care about? So how can we connect inclusion to innovation, to artificial intelligence, to sustainability, and all these other really, really critical issues? And in the third group, I think all they need is like a fire lit underneath them. They have their hands on the wheel. They have the key in the ignition. They are ready to start the car. They just need someone to start the car, to tell them to start the car and go, right? And so this is a lot of times what I do in my speeches is it's meant to take the person who's sitting in the car, ready to go, ready to start the car, to get them to start that car and to move it forward. And the folks who are in the back seat saying we shouldn't go anywhere, they can stay in the back seat.
Yeah, thank you. Super. And so, yeah, I've noticed that resistance can be a significant barrier when initiating this inclusive culture. So, how can leaders effectively address resistance and foster a more inclusive culture?
Yeah, the resistance often, I find that the resistance often comes to terminology. The resistance comes against the words that we're using to describe it. So I find that there are trigger words that make people start pushing back. Inclusion is one of them. The minute the word inclusion leaves my mouth, people automatically go, whoa, I don't want anything to do with that. Diversity is another one. You mentioned the word diversity, suddenly, whoa, I don't want anything to do with that. Equality, whoa, I don't want to do anything. So what I have found is really effective is to not use any of those words. We can talk about all the other things that go into making diverse and inclusive environments healthy and great. But if we're using those words, it can cause people to resist. And so what I talk about instead, when I'm talking about something like inclusion, I'll talk about innovation. And I'll say how new perspectives can move innovation forward, can make us be more innovative and think more innovative. And so I don't talk about diversity. I talk about different perspectives. And suddenly they start thinking, oh, we do need people with different perspectives. How can we get people with different perspectives? And then that leads them into, without even knowing, into the issue around diversity, into the issue around inclusion. How can we make people feel secure and safe in their working environments, right? Has nothing to do with inclusion, but is exactly to do with inclusion, right? I don't mention the word inclusion. I mention creating psychological safety in your working environments. It's absolutely necessary for an inclusive working environment, but you don't say inclusion and suddenly they're thinking psychological safety, that's such a good thing. Oh my gosh, our employees are going to be so happy. Or you talk about employee satisfaction and that gets them all excited. The other thing that I think a lot of people who resist can miss is that their role is really, 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 really important. Okay, not as resistors necessarily, but their role as human beings are also important to moving us forward from an inclusion standpoint. So let's just be clear here. A lot of the people who resist inclusion are people who look like and have the same background as I do. Right? So we're looking at this field, I'm going to say we're looking at this field of inclusion and saying, well, where's my role? What am I supposed to do? I don't get to do anything about this. I just have to sit back and watch everybody else have fun. Right? Yeah. So, and I'm not saying we should make it about them or us. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is it's going to take all of us working together to be inclusive, to create inclusive working environments. And so understanding that the role of straight white men can play a role in issues around inclusion, I think it's important to articulate that, not in a pandering way or in a way that is, very kind of patting them on the head, saying it's going to be okay, you can play too, but actually finding substantive roles for all of us and dealing with issues that also affect the community of straight white men, things like mental health issues, which are really, really important in that community. So when we're talking about inclusion, I think we need to talk about inclusion for everyone. And I think we need to think about how all of our roles work together to make inclusion happen.
Yeah, understood. So I saw you are an author as well. So, and also I think writing can be more powerful for advocacy. So what inspired you to write, and can you tell about the books you have written, and also what kind of things the readers can take as the key takeaways from your books? And
I agree with you 100% that writing and words are really, really important. And you know what I found is also important are, here's my book, are
Okay.
pictures.
Okay.
So the book I
Oh.
published this year is called The Sins and Wins of Inclusive Leadership. And I call it a picture book for CEOs. So the content is geared for executives, professionals, but it's created in a way that it's as easy to understand as a children's book. So I
Yeah.
also call it a children's book for CEOs. So each of this, in this book, there's 7 chapters. Each chapter has a setup, conflict, a resolution, and then a key takeaway. And here you're looking at one of the key takeaways in the resolutions. So it's a very simple messages to follow, very simple stories to understand. You can read the whole book in about 15 minutes, even if you're a slow reader. But the messages in it are sticky. They will stick to your way of thinking, and you will remember them as you go into your work. And what I also tell folks who buy my book is I say, take each of the pages, the takeaway pages, these are the solution pages, and tear them out of the book and put them up on your bulletin board or put them up in your office somewhere to just remind you of the important things that really matter. Now, I have over 50 academic publications and peer-reviewed journals, books upon books upon books that nobody has read, save my mother on occasion. This book has been the first thing I've ever made that people have cared about and have wanted. And I've decided that I'm going to make it into a book series. So the first book is Inclusive Leadership, The Sins and Wins of Inclusive Leadership. The second book is going to be The Sins and Wins of Inclusive Design. And it's coming out in about 1 week, so I have to get the rest of it ready to the publisher. After that, we're hoping to write one on artificial intelligence, one on education, and we'll see where we go from there. We're going to try to write 1 or 2 every year so that the series continues to grow and grow and grow. But they'll all be structured the same way, 7 stories, illustrated, in an easy way to understand and engage with, and funny.
Yeah, so sounds interesting. And can I ask a cross question? So, why using yellow for your background as well as I can see the book cover also in yellow? Is there anything special?
No, there's nothing specific to the color yellow. My personal brand uses a dark blue and a yellow, kind of a gold. And the reason why I chose those colors was only because I look really good in blue in a blue suit, and I have a gold tie. So it kind of worked out, and like everything could be well branded just because of the clothes I already owned.
Okay. Okay, interesting. And so you are a comedian as well, right?
Yes.
So yeah. So I want to know your approach to integrating humor and storytelling.
This is a great question.
Can be very good, and like you might be using that talent to promote equality in a fascinating way. So how do you use these methods to engage the audience and drive your message? You became a comedian earlier, or like from early stage?
No, later. So I became a comedian, a storyteller after I started doing motivational speaking, and the two are linked into one another. So one of the things I realized as a professor is if you lecture someone, they tune out, they stop listening. But if you tell them a story, they will sit for hours and listen to you. And if you tell them a funny story, then they will sit there all day and listen to you. So I've gotten to the point now where these are 2 skill sets that I've been slowly crafting over the years and getting better and better at, but with the sole purpose to influence my audiences. Because if they're listening to my stories, if they're relating to the characters and the people and to myself, often I have myself as part of the story, if they're relating to those things, then they'll remember them. And even if they never remember the statistics that I cite or any of the other information that I give them, if all they remember is that story that Anthony told about his student who criticized him about his research, and then the outcome of that story, well, I listened to her, and then I was able to create a new a new area of research. Well, that's a huge advantage for me as a scientist. That can be an advantage to you as a business owner if you're the one listening to your employees who are telling you things that maybe you don't want to hear. And so these are the kinds of skill sets that I tackle in my speeches. And I use storytelling, I use humor to make it enjoyable so that people pay attention.
Interesting. So, where do you think this inclusive leadership will head in future? Are there any emerging trends or developments that excite you?
Yeah, I think there's two things that have me the most excited. One is artificial intelligence, of course. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, so I can't not say AI. And AI is exciting for two things. Number one, AI is exciting because it's giving us a new tool to enable people to participate in different aspects of life. I hate writing. I am one of the worst writers ever. It takes me forever to write a sentence. It took me 7 years to write my doctorate. All right. It takes me a lot of time to write. But with something like ChatGPT, I can sit down and I can just say, hey, give me 10 ideas for this. And boom, there's 10 ideas. And then I can look through them and I say, well, all 10 of them are terrible. But you know what? Number 3 inspired me to think this way. And now I have some writing to do. Now I can write about stuff because now I'm thinking about the important issues. So I think ChatGPT, AI, I think it's moving in such a great direction because it's empowering people to do things they wouldn't normally do. And that goes across all communities, not just for people like me, but people who cut across different disadvantaged groups. Of course, there's the dark side to all of this. There's a lot of problems with AI when it comes to inclusion, and I hope I'm heartened that we're talking about these issues, that there are people out there talking about these issues, including me. Let's leave that for a second. The other trend that I see that's most compelling for me is understanding what it is to be a human being. And I know this sounds really, really, really basic, but even in my lifetime, our understanding of what the human experience is has changed dramatically. So in my childhood, we didn't have something called autism spectrum, right? We didn't have something called ADHD. It was called something entirely different. When I was a child, we didn't have a gender spectrum. There was straight and gay, and that was basically it. And now we have people who are thinking and pushing our understanding of humanity forward so much that it's expanded all of our kind of understandings of what it is to be human. And I'm so excited to see where we go next with that, where we continually to try to expand our concept of what it is to be human. And I love that because it gives more people a chance to feel whole. It gives more people a chance to feel connected to each other and to the world around them. So that's one trend I've seen, and I guarantee you we're gonna continue to see it grow and expand, and people to connect with one another on a human-to-human level, no matter what identity is attached to that. And those identities will continue to grow and expand, and even something like disability. So I started a lot of my academic career in the field of disability and disability rights. Our understanding of disability has changed massively. And if you go back 100 years, 200 years, it's changed incredibly. So I'm excited to see where we go next with issues around disability, gender, race, and the intersection of all of those identities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so aspiring leaders often seek guidance from the leaders who are already in the industries and who have become successful. So what kind of advice would you give to someone looking to cultivate a more inclusive environment within their own leadership roles, or for a beginner?
Yeah. For someone already established in their leadership role, I would say listen to people who are junior to you. I would say find a mentor of someone who is 5 years, 10 years junior to your position. So if you're at the executive level, find somebody who just started at your work, who is just out of college, who may be still in college, and get them to mentor you. Be explicit that this is a mentor-mentee relationship, that you as a senior person expect that junior person to give you insights on your work and your career. And as a senior person, you're going to have to create a safe space for them to do that. And you're going to have to build them up and give them confidence so that they feel qualified to give you insights. But there's so much value that can come out of that. And if you're a junior person, my advice isn't that much different. Find someone younger than you, less experienced than you, who can mentor you on where you could go next. I think there's obvious value to having a senior mentor, but there's also a not so obvious drawback for a senior mentor. And that is, when it comes to mentorship, someone who's advanced in their career can get tunnel vision. They can see the problems that they've tried to resolve in their past very well, but anything outside of that scope, it's difficult for us to wrap our heads around. And so when a junior professional comes to me and asks me for advice, they might ask me advice for something I've never faced, never experienced before in my life. And as a mentor, I might be, feel that I have to give them an answer. But the reality is the answer that I give them is going to be incredibly flawed. And I always tell my mentors, I'm right about half the time. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. And I think there's not enough of that humility when it comes to mentorship on a senior to junior level. And I think we can, by inverting that, I think there's a lot of really incredible value that can be had on both sides of the coin.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then, I want to ask about, so how do you measure you're into social entrepreneurship, and
Yes.
let's talk a bit about that. So how do you measure the social impact of your work?
Yeah. So measuring social impact, the way I think about it is about the first, second, and third degree impacts of our work. Often with social entrepreneurs, they're solely focused on the first level impact. So maybe you're working to bring education to rural areas of Sri Lanka. Maybe you want to teach women coding in Sri Lanka. Maybe that's what you want. You want to teach them how to program a computer, right? And you might think that your only impact is on the women in the class, right, that are taking your courses. And they are your primary, that's your first level impact. But there are so many secondary and tertiary impacts that come from that we're often not considering, measuring, or really even just taking account of at all. So let's just give an example. Maybe you're offering that class at a high school. And maybe in the process of offering that class, you can also train the teachers to deliver that same class. Well, now you've got a secondary impact to your work. You're focused on training young girls on how to code. Well, look, now I can also train teachers in that process, and then they can go on and do training for girls. So there's a secondary impact there. Well, what about the tertiary impacts? What about the impacts to the economy of these young girls who go out, maybe create their own businesses and are able to code, create a technology? These are the kinds of things I think not a lot of social entrepreneurs have a full grasp on, and they often don't measure at all. So I would, for social entrepreneurs especially, think about the primary impact, the secondary impacts, and the tertiary impacts. What's the drop in the pond that creates those ripple effects? And what are those ripple effects? Try to track them, try to measure them, whether it's quantitatively with numbers or qualitatively with testimonials and interviews and things like that. And don't neglect the finances. Creating impact is great, but if you don't have financial sustainability, it can be a real struggle.
And so what role do you see partnerships playing in driving social change?
For driving social change, partnerships are 100% essential. Without partnerships, we're doing nothing. We're operating in a vacuum. But I want to be clear on what I mean by partnerships, because partnerships can occur across a number of levels. And it's easy to start thinking about partnerships in terms of institutions. Oh, I'm working with Harvard University, and I'm working with the United Nations, and I'm working with the European Union. Great. All right. That doesn't matter as much as the human being that you're working with. Okay. Having those big names on your website and on your CV, great, get them up there, you know? But when it comes down to it, the people who are going to make change happen, it has to be a human-to-human relationship. And so think about those human beings in your social circles. And again, primary, secondary, tertiary, and on, who are the people 4 persons removed from you that might be in a position where they can support or help you or connect with you? So for me, whenever I find someone new comes into my social circle, the most excuse me, the most important thing that I think about is that what can I do to connect with that person on a human-to-human level, not on a transactional basis. Oh, will you do this for me? I can do this for you. Nobody wants that. We don't need that in the world. We need human relationships. So if you're thinking about someone who could be a client or a partner or a supporter or a funder, treat them like a human being. Learn about them. Learn about what they care about. What brings them joy in life? Do they have children? Do they love animals? What is it that they have a passion for outside of their work, so that you can connect with them on that human-to-human level? And I think that's what drives change, is the human-to-human connection drives change.
Yeah. And how can individuals get involved in social entrepreneurship and create a positive impact with the experience and exposure you have? I would like to get an answer.
Sure. I'm happy to talk about that. So a lot of it depends on the context. We're really lucky here in Norway, where the challenges that we face in society they're there, but they're often not very visible, and a lot of folks go through life without really having a firm understanding of social issues. And in many countries that I've gotten the privilege to work in, countries like Somalia and Uganda and Mozambique, these countries, the problems exist all around. And so when I talk to students in these countries, or I talk to professionals in these countries, they see the issues. They're surrounded by the issues every day. So then it becomes a challenge to isolate what is the problem that you want to solve as a social entrepreneur, and then narrowing. Every time a social entrepreneur comes to me and says, Anthony, can I pitch my idea? I say, sure. And then invariably they want to solve some grand challenge. And I say, you're never going to solve that. That's not where we can innovate. All right. We can maybe engineer a solution. If you want to provide, clean drinking water to, 10,000 rural villages, then we can engineer a solution for that. And given the funding, we can create that infrastructure. But what we can't do is engineer a solution to something like equality, right? We have to think about innovations, and an innovation solves a very narrowly defined problem, not a grand problem, a very narrowly defined problem. And so when entrepreneurs come to me and they tell me, oh, we want to solve this grand challenge, I say, it's fine, love where your head's at, let's get into the weeds, let's get into the thick of it. Who are the people that are facing these problems? Solve a problem for one person and then expand out from that. Don't try to solve a problem for 10,000 people and narrow into one person.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, thank you for that advice as well. And what advice would you give for the aspiring social entrepreneurs? The same,
I think,
like you did.
Yeah. I think for social entrepreneurs, you can't go wrong to just making connections online. Not every, a lot of people have access to the internet. Most people have access to social media. Make yourself a LinkedIn profile. Make yourself a profile on. I would just stick to LinkedIn. And just start connecting with people every week. Set aside 15 minutes and start connecting with people you think are doing cool stuff. right? Learn from them. Try to understand what the content that they're creating. People like me and a lot of folks who are similarly situated create a lot of content for social media. And one thing I hate doing about creating content for social media is creating it and then nobody likes it, nobody looks at it. It just goes into like this, hole. If you as a young person, as an entrepreneur, are really interested in this field, seek out the knowledge creators, okay? They're the ones that are not only going to be able to give you explicit advice on you and your situation, they're also the ones that are going to be able to give you implicit advice along the way, so long as you're connected to them in some capacity online. And that's something you can do no matter what. The other thing I think social entrepreneurs need to do is they need to get into the world that they want to work. A lot of them are already there. So a lot of them see the problems because they're facing the problems every day. But a lot of them are thinking, oh, I'm going to solve a problem for this group that exists out here somewhere in the middle of nowhere that I don't know anything about. You're never going to solve that problem. You need to get in with them, working with them, maybe living with them, but being with them on a regular basis. Connect to those communities, build those relationships. Only then will you truly understand the problems. And even then, you're still going to be biased. But work with those communities that are facing the issues that you want to try to solve.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Doctor. So it's been enlightening to hear your perspectives today. So I know that regarding your books, we could have spent one day, and regarding your speeches, the experience in the way you are talking, those things we can talk for hours. So I would like to conclude today's discussion with one final question. So what final thoughts or encouragement would you like to share with my viewers, so especially those who are eager to drive positive change in their workplaces or in their communities, to do something to their communities? Like, I'm also trying to do something, so like that.
Of course, of course. I would say, please, 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 please reach out to me. Connect with me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Type my name in, Anthony G or Anthony Giannoumis or Dr. Anthony G. If you use one of those, enough combinations, you'll find me. I'm not terribly hard to find. If you're really struggling, go to my website, inclusiveleadership.solutions. So again, that website, inclusiveleadership.solutions, inclusive leadership, all one word, .solutions. I have all my social media on that website. I update my blog on the regular basis. You can see all my videos and things like that. Connect with me. I'm not looking for followers here. I'm looking for connections. So connect with me. Drop into my DMs. Comment on my posts so we can have a conversation. These are ways that we can learn from one another. And I'm not going to be able to answer all the questions, but what I can do is help them ask the right questions.
Okay, so it was great to connect with you. Like, I know that you might be having a busy schedule also, but thank you for accepting my invitation. Like, with a quick notice, you told the relevant time slots you can get in touch, and yeah, it was so quick. And thank you. Like, it was an honor, as well as thank you for that humbleness you had. So I wish you all the best in your future things, and also I want you to see you soon in Sri Lanka as well. I also think of the opportunities I can connect with you and invite you for that. Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you for the awesome and wonderful session I had, and I would like to connect with you soon, to maybe once after you publish the next book, I can sync up again with you. Yeah.
So, that would be amazing. Yes, please. Let's do that.
Yeah. So thank you,
Yasumi.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.